Good afternoon. Thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks for your patience. Well, we got the live feedback up again today. We've got a number of people that we're going to be presenting today. We'll introduce those folks in a bit. I want to again thank Lindsay for doing the great work signing. Let's see Lindsay do her own name in signing. Okay, all right, way to go. Thank you for that. But today, we're again grateful to have all the press that are here today. Thank you for maintaining your social distancing here in this large room that we're meeting in. We appreciate that. We also appreciate the other guests and speakers that we have here that are going to be joining us today. The first thing we want to do is do an update on confirmed cases. Today, North Dakota Department of Health confirmed 12 additional cases of the novel coronavirus disease, or COVID-19, including at least 2 more cases of community spread, which again, the definition of community spread is when we have an illness that is spreading with the source of the infection is unknown, as opposed to travel related where we're able to identify it. What that means is that means we've more than doubled the number of cases in just the last 24 hours. And we've talked at previous press conferences about how this has the ability to exponentially grow. And so we're now seeing that curve that other states and other countries have seen, where we're starting to get that doubling effect. In terms of where the cases are being reported, 10 cases are in Burleigh County, 1 in Morton County, 1 in Ward County. We also sadly have news that our first individual who has contracted COVID-19 is hospitalized. That brings us the total to 673 tested, 654 of those are negative, and the 19 positive. But I think all of this, again, demonstrates how critically important it is. The messaging that we've been delivering for many weeks is to practice this new form of behavior, which is difficult for some folks to break the old habits of how we interacted with each other. But again, social distancing, the basic measure there is try to stay at least 6 feet away. If you're sick, stay home. And if you have someone else in your family is being tested for COVID-19, the strong recommendation is that you also stay home until the tests arrive. Washing your hands frequently is also key to this. And as we heard from Dr. Joan Connell yesterday, she calls those people who are adopting these behaviors heroic. We want to emphasize that. And again, we've got many organizations and people around the state that are doing a great job of this social distancing, including making tough decisions about canceling events. We've got faith-based leaders that are canceling in-person gatherings, which again, I know is probably something they've never ever had to do before, but we appreciate their leadership. Private sector, employers and others are making courageous decisions, and many folks have demonstrated this leadership everywhere that we're looking for across everybody in the state to help us slow the spread. Again, the strategy is by reducing contact, that is the social distancing. By doing that, we can slow the spread. When we slow the spread, then we have an opportunity to not overwhelm our healthcare resources. And if people, again, may think that what we're dealing with here is, some faraway thing that happened in China that is, may never happen here, or that China somehow wasn't prepared or wasn't able to do that, we have to look at some other examples. And we can look at other states in the United States, including the state of Washington, who, as they have passed through the 1,000 case mark, is seeing their resources being stretched and the supply chains to support those medical resources being stretched. So if we can know what happens in the state of Washington, we can know what can happen here. And if others might still be living in a state of either disbelief or denial, we just have to look today at the numbers globally that are coming in from Italy. Today, Italy passed China in the terms of number of deaths. As of earlier today, they had 3,400 deaths in Italy. And again, the mortality rate from that, 87% of the people in Italy of the 87% of the 3,400 who've died in Italy were over the age of 70. So again, we talked yesterday about how we're not talking about tens or hundreds or 1,000 people we're trying to protect in North Dakota, over 20% of our population would fit in the category of being either over age 65 or have a chronic underlying health disease. And while we're talking about taking this opportunity for improved health. This is a respiratory disease. People with underlying respiratory problems find themselves more susceptible, and that can be at any age if you got a respiratory problem. So probably not a better time than ever right now to reach out to all the resources we have through the North Dakota Department of Health and make a decision to quit smoking. Because smoking, of course, directly correlated with respiratory disease, and for the new wave that we have seen sweep through young people in our state around vaping. Also, again, vaping introduces products into your lungs that your lungs were not meant to absorb. It is a health issue. And again, stopping smoking or stopping vaping would be strongly recommended by our Department of Health during this time frame, and maybe for the rest of your life, also a good decision. I want to give a shout out to the folks at our state lab. We've got a small state lab that is dealing with unprecedented activity that they've never had to go through before. And the state lab, of course, is part of our North Dakota Department of Health. They have processed these over 600 tests, 673 tests that have come in. But as they've ramped up their capability, the expectation is that in the next 24 hours, the North Dakota State Lab will process over 500 tests in the next 24 hours. And those people have asked us, where is that coming from? At least so far, through the first 673 tests, those have come in from over 32 different counties across North Dakota. Given that we've got this evidence, strong evidence of community transmission now in North Dakota, and as we said yesterday, it's important that if we feel like we're acting too soon, we might be in time, and if we think we're on time, we're probably too late. So then after a lot of thought and consideration, we are today issuing, and I've just signed before I've come into this meeting, an executive order with several directives. All bars, restaurants, breweries, cafes, similar on-site dining establishments are now by executive order closed to on-sale and on-site patrons, and this is statewide. We also absolutely positively understand the importance, and particularly in some of our smaller communities, that these bars and restaurants play in the important food supply system. So takeout, delivery, curbside, drive-through, or off-sale services may continue, and we ask these business owners to find a way to continue to keep their businesses going and keep serving your customers, but do it without on-site or on-consumption parts of your business model. We know this is going to require a change for a lot of people, but we thank you for doing that, because this is one of the ways that we can stop the spread and make sure that we preserve what will be soon viewed as our scarce and limited capacity that we have in the medical facility to deal with what could be a really growing challenge. We're also want to give a shout out to many who have already made the decision to close. Particularly, I want to thank dentists across the state who, by and large, on their own made a decision to stop offering dental services except if it's an emergency, because this would be an example of an activity very hard to do more than 6 feet away from each other. So thank you to the dentists, and thanks to many other businesses that have made those tough decisions. We want to also be respectful of our tribal nations that we have in our state, and all the conversations we've had with them. Many of them have already been making tough decisions about limiting access, reducing bus trips, closing buffets at casinos. This is a tribal decision under their sovereign government to make a decision, but we would ask our tribal partners and our tribal neighbors to also strongly consider going with the same closure basis that we've described here, which is, again, stay open. Some of those casinos run gas stations and serve food and have groceries as part of what would be considered casino operations. We would ask those to stay open, but we're asking for on-site and on-sale activities and on-site dining to close. But again, that is up to our tribal leaders. We know that many of them have been wrestling with that decision, and we're happy to connect with them as they think through that decision and share all the information that we have up to date. Also, recreational facilities, health clubs, athletic facilities, and theaters, including movie theaters and music or entertainment venues, are also included under this executive order, and they are directed to close. In some cases, they may be able to find alternative business models, but in many cases, we know this is going to cause economic hardship here in North Dakota, as it is in the many other states where these executive orders have already gone out. In terms of our state offices, as part of that same executive order, we have made a decision to try to continue what was already advancing, is to restrict public access to state facilities. And the key word there is public access. So that means visitors, tours, and others that may not have official business are going to be restricted effective immediately, at least through April 6, 2020, for accessing state facilities. It's important for us from a continuity of government standpoint to ensure that the state employees, who in many cases are delivering essential services to the citizens in North Dakota, that they remain healthy. And as any other employer does, if we have a state employee who's not feeling well, no matter how important your work is that you may feel, this is the time to be North Dakota smart and stay home versus North Dakota tough and come in and perhaps contaminate a workplace where other essential workers are working. So again, to make this happen, we've had great support from a lot of people, but let me give a shout out to all of our statewide elected officials and the great cabinet officials that we have that have been working through this. The work that has gone on so far has been incredible. We have by the end of today, more than 3,100 team members, including over 1,000 today, have moved to be able to do their work remotely. And again, I want to emphasize here strongly that this is about the continuing and the continuance of government, is that we are restricting access to buildings, but we are keeping government going. That's an important distinction. So I'd ask the media, there should be no headlines that state government is closing. We remain open. We remain open for business, and we will remain open for business, doing the important services that we need to do throughout this time. But we are, to protect our workers and keep that continuity of government going, we're working towards creating these platforms that allow remote work. How is that possible? Well, more thank yous. In addition to all the other electeds and the cabinet leaders that are making decisions about what they can do remotely or not, what's essential, who may still access a building or not, we also want to thank our legislators, because with their support for the IT budgets 2 sessions ago and last session, and the great work of NDIT, that's what's allowed us to be able to have the platforms to be able to go ahead and do this. So again, we want to thank all of them as well. There have been some questions already about our universities, because those are also state facilities, but the key word here is public access. For those in the university, if you've got key researchers working alone in a lab in the middle of a project, they can keep working. University presidents and other agency heads and elected will have the opportunity to decide what they deem to be able to be done remotely or have to be done on site, and they can make those decisions as leaders of their organizations, again, following the guidelines that we have. So we're restricting access to the public, to state facilities, and we're moving work remotely rapidly. Another thing, executive order, which is brand new news, you'll be the first to hear this, but another executive order I've signed in the last half hour has to do with a suspension of regulations related to licensing of health professionals. One of the things that we are learning in our close collaboration with the private sector health providers across our state is that we know that each state has historically had their own boards and associations which create licensure, whether that's for nurses or doctors or physical therapists, pharmacists, respiratory care practitioners, dietitians, and nutritionists, addiction counselors, integrative health, clinical laboratory personnel, naturopaths, emergency medical services, and so on and so on. All of these different categories have their own licensures. With this, essentially through an emergency executive order going to universal recognition, means that if someone is fully licensed and up to speed and able to practice in another state, in faraway places like from Minnesota or South Dakota, they will be able to work in North Dakota. Now understand that we have many healthcare systems, including those that work in our major markets, that are multi-state operations. So whether you're a CHI, an Essentia, a Sanford, an Altru, any of these organizations that have got multi-state operations, they're now going to be able to move personnel from places like Bemidji or Moorhead over to Fargo and be able to do that. This is important because we don't know where the surge capacity is going to be able to be needed, and so we want to make sure that we do that. Also, there is lots of licensing requirements for hospitals and other healthcare facilities under all kinds of chapters and code, and we're also moving to deregulating some of those aspects during this period of emergency. So if we needed to, for example, convert a dorm at a university into a place where we had surge capacity for patients that might be suffering from COVID, that we would have the ability to do that and speed our way through what might have otherwise been a licensing process that would not have allowed us to convert state facilities for those uses. So that executive order is up and online, and people can take a look at that. The next topic, which is going to take up a next big section of our conference today, has to do with school closures. As you all know, on Sunday night by executive order, we announced that North Dakota's K-12 schools would be closed this week to try to slow the spread of COVID-19, give us a chance to gather more data, better assess where we were in terms of testing, to confirm that in fact we do have community spread, and to give us a chance to do planning at both the school district level and at the health system level to do that. And there's been a lot of great planning that's gone on to do that. And we gave essentially, as part of that order on Sunday night, the order was clear, and the assignment, if you want to use school terms, was clear, is that we asked that while the buildings were closed and schools were closed this week, that essential school district staff would report to work this week to work on alternative learning plans, both in terms of whether we might reopen or whether if we might have an extended closure. Many of the districts across the state have been working extremely hard on those plans. We've seen some very creative and innovative plans coming forward. You're going to hear about some of those in a few minutes. But as promised yesterday, we here today wanted to give additional guidance. Last Sunday night, we said we'd have guidance by the end of the week. We're one day ahead of that, or maybe 2 days, depending if you count Saturday as the end of the week or whether you count Friday. But here we are. The first piece of news that everybody needs to understand is that I will be issuing an executive order. This one has not yet been signed. We're still working out all the details on it, but before school resumes, I will be issuing an executive order that allows age-appropriate alternative learning, including distant learning, to count towards instructional hours. As was shared by the superintendent at the conference yesterday, currently under state law, there are some restrictions where online, in some cases online did count towards instructional learning, specific cases, in other cases it didn't. Through this executive order, this is going to allow all of our school districts to know with confidence that if they are coming up with alternative plans that include online, that it can count for effectively in seat time. So that's number one. So more flexibility to all of our districts. Number two is we are going to maintain mandatory restricted access to K-12 schools, and that's the same as we were this week, which is restricted to essential staff only. That'll continue until further notice. This means that schools will remain closed to students across the state. The next question that comes from that when you close it is like, well, what about, are you going to do waivers? This is like a storm day. Is the governor going to provide a waiver? And what a waiver means is that the schools will still continue to receive their payments as if they were operating. And as governor, I have the power to do that. I'm granting waivers for the next week and the 2 days following. So that's 7 additional days waived on top of the 5 days that have already been waived for a total of 12 days. And so again, our school year is mandated to be 175 days long. Effectively, this has just shortened our school year to 163 days. And these waivers ensure that districts will be able to pay teachers and their hourly employees that are so important, whether those are bus drivers or food service personnel, custodians, and other staff. And it's important that they are paid because some of those people are going to work this week and have been working this week, delivering on the other missions of the school this week, non-academic missions, but like the nutrition mission that many of these bus drivers and others have been working on. The custodial staffs, I'm sure, are working overtime, trying to make sure that the schools are clean and disinfected. And so this again will give the districts, the superintendents, and school boards both the flexibility and the financial certainty, whether it's teachers, administrators, or other professionals, that during this 12-day waiver that they can continue to do planning for if we have extended closures. Now let me bring up another topic, which is 2 sessions ago, Senate Bill 2186 passed during the 2017 legislature. This is also known as the Innovative Education Bill. Schools were empowered to seek a waiver so that they could get waivers granted to certain sections of state law so they could submit innovative education plans. These plans were designed to improve education delivery or the administration of education, increase educational opportunities, and improve student outcomes. This legislation was broadly supported. It was supported by DPI, the Teachers Union, ND United, North Dakota Council of Educational Leaders, North Dakota School Board Association. We have a few leading edge schools that over the last 2.5 years that have submitted and implemented plans, and those include Northern Cass, Oaks, West Fargo, and our own Youth Correctional Center here, which operates a high school here at in Mandan. And others are in the application process. We would take this opportunity to remind the school districts that have not submitted in the 12 days that they have left, where we are doing full funding through the all of next week and 2 days into the following week through March 31st, to take this opportunity to think about developing their innovative education plans because during these extraordinary circumstances, this is a time for us to be innovating, and they'll have an opportunity to do this. We cannot let this pandemic deprive our students of an education that prepares them to succeed in our rapidly evolving 21st century economy. Let me just say something else then. So the districts, we're asking them to do planning. There's been some confusion about the nature of this. DPI will be sharing more explicitly what the expectations are of what constitutes a plan. This is not fill out a form and get a waiver. This is actually build a plan for how you and your unique circumstances in your district can best serve the students that you have. The plans are expected to be submitted by next Friday, March 27th. As you'll hear, we've got some school districts that have already used the 4 days this week and already literally have their plans done, if either done or nearly done. And that will give, through next Friday, will give all school districts 2 full weeks with full pay to have worked on the alternative plan. We are asking then that districts submit those plans by Friday, March 27th. The state will review and approve. If approved, then districts are expected to begin implementing their plans on April 1st. So that's a way of saying that school in North Dakota, well, there may not be access to school buildings. There's an expectation that school will resume through alternative plans on April 1. And if plans are not submitted by March 27th, or if those plans are submitted but aren't approved, the other option that school districts have is to, as Lieutenant Governor Sanford said, roll the dice, see if things get better, and hold school in June. If you can't figure out a way to do this through alternative learning or innovative processes, each of these school districts has till June 30 to complete their school year. So that's another opportunity that they would have. But again, I think we've got in our state we've become so accustomed to think about buildings as places that are required for learning, but I think we know that we're in an environment today where learning can take place anywhere. I've heard someone say that learning can take place anywhere, anytime, on any device. I think that's a possibility. We also have the opportunity to go back to good old-fashioned books. We have an opportunity to use the telephone. We have an opportunity to retask how we're using the paraprofessionals that might have been doing in-school work to be able to do daily check-ins with students. We have an opportunity to build strong relationships with kids through checking in, FaceTime or Skype or telephone. And again, when I say age appropriate, because what's going to work for someone who's working on an AP course in high school is not going to work for a student that might be in kindergarten. But this is a chance, again, and I know that this may seem like a tough assignment for our K-12, but I would like to just say we got one thing that we have going for us is we've got great innovative leaders. You're going to hear from some of the people who are doing it. As adults, I would encourage everybody in North Dakota, whether you're a teacher that's professionally trained or whether you're just someone who's a friend, a mentor, an adult, or an important person in someone's life. Kids are learning from us right now. They're modeling off our behavior. They're looking at how do our parents and how do our adults deal with what is an unprecedented situation. And we have an opportunity to teach one of the greatest lessons to all of our students, and that's to see their school district stand up and figure out a way. We want our kids to overcome challenges. We want them to persevere. We want them to innovate. That's what we're trying to teach them. What a better way for us to teach them than for us to actually get out and do some great work and create some new approaches and new models that will help them. And the last thing I'm going to say is let's remember our seniors. We got students that are 45 days, thought they were 45 days away from graduating, and they maybe thought they're going to play in a state tournament. That's gone. Their prom is gone. Their graduation might be gone. Try to put yourself in that position when we're thinking about that, and let's really figure out a way to get out there and take care of all of our students. But we've got over 10,000 seniors out there that we owe something to as a state. The other group that I think I owe something to, and Brent and I feel strongly about this, is that we don't take school closings lightly. I don't take giving waivers for another 7 days lightly. North Dakota taxpayers have been extremely supportive and generous in how they support education in our state. We have 113,000 students that attend public K-12 schools in our state. The 12 days, it's about just over $8 million a day in state money and local taxpayer dollars to keep our schools opening. So by closing the schools for 12 days through the waivers that I've granted, that is $96 million of money that has been spent for us to close schools. That is why on April 1st, we're giving a strong directive that we want to open up. And for that $8 million a day that we're spending in education, let's figure out a way to provide alternative education, and let's figure out a way to do it when we may not have access to our buildings because of the growing pandemic. So that's the message there. But to do that, again, I don't listen to me. We've got great leaders, and we've got one that wrote a letter and two that are here today. And the solutions and the reason why we're asking for local plans. The reason why essentially we're assigning homework to each district is because local educational leaders and their school boards, their teachers, they're going to know best what they can do. They're going to know with the support of the private sector. If people say, "Oh, I don't have broadband in my community," we've already had telecom companies and local broadband companies and rural telephone co-ops say, "Look, we'll provide 4 months of high-speed internet access for free to any student that doesn't have it." We've already had businesses raise their hand. So this is not a time to be stopped by constraints. This is a time for us to focus on how we can knock those down. Again, teaching all of our students how we work through and solve problems. So anyway, we love the fact that we're going to have locally derived, locally delivered plans so we can ensure that our students are safe from a health standpoint, but we serve that they're educated in the state of North Dakota through the academic year. We got some school districts that are doing a great job. Scranton, southwestern North Dakota, Scranton Miners. Superintendent knows them, probably played against them in high school. But their superintendent, John Pretzer, couldn't be here today, but he wrote this letter to the superintendent and I. He said, back in February, this is again Superintendent John Pretzer from Scranton, North Dakota, back in February when things started to escalate in Asia, my staff began gearing up for, at the time, what seemed like a remote possibility that the virus could quickly impact our communities. We did, however, recognize this possibility, and we wanted to prepare for our students. At this time, we were prepared to go completely web-based with our instruction through the grade levels. This did not happen without an intense amount of planning, preparation, training, and efforts. Our teachers have used 2 platforms to make this accessible, make this happen. Both of these technology platforms are available in Microsoft Office 365. These platforms are Microsoft Teams and Microsoft OneNote. Students can know how to easily access their classroom groups, receive and return assignments, communicate with their classmates and their teachers, and these products include video conferencing, whether it's individual or one-to-many. Certainly the depth of technology we are using has been modified for our younger students. Nonetheless, all of our students have been prepared. I believe my staff is like no other, and they have done an incredible job, an innovative job to harness the technology that's at their disposal. We are here to serve our students, and walking away from them during a scary time is not serving them. They will be comforted to be in contact with their classmates and teachers each day. They too will need a sense of normalcy. Normalcy not only by doing schoolwork, but by reminders from important adults in their lives to remind them to stay safe. My teaching staff has informed me and understand what we are looking for during this time. Assignments that are stimulating, not frustrating. I have the utmost confidence in these people. Again, that was Superintendent Pretzer from Scranton, North Dakota. I'm sure he's watching online. Thank you for that beautiful letter, unsolicited letter sent to us. And again, here is, when we talk about leadership everywhere, this is leadership everywhere, because these were people that were planning before we even asked people to develop plans. This is people who were planning in some of our smallest rural school districts to figure out a way to get it done. I'm pleased that, as we say, we may have, we love the competitiveness between our great school districts. And well, he says he's got a staff like no other. I think we have 2 other superintendents that are here with us today that might contest that. We're going to give each of them a chance to share, because we wanted to share one small rural school, one medium-sized school, and one large school. And the first one that's up next in the batting order here, I would like to invite Valley City Superintendent Josh Johnson up to talk about his district's plans. And up front, I want to say again, Josh, thanks to you and your team for all the great work that you've been doing, and thanks for working through and innovating during this time of stress. But here's Valley City Superintendent Josh Johnson. I know it's quiet in here, but all the Highliners are screaming and cheering for you right now online. So.
I hope so, and I hope I represent them well. Thank you, Governor Burgum. Thank you, Lieutenant Sanford, Superintendent Baszler, for inviting me to speak on behalf of the educators across North Dakota, my students, staff, and the community in Valley City. I'm very proud to represent these hardworking and courageous educators, our teachers, cooks, custodians, bus drivers, secretaries, and school administrators who have spent countless hours in the past week finding ways to continue to serve our students in K-12 North Dakota public education. While we recognize that the coronavirus has created many challenges for us in education, I firmly believe that it has brought out the best in educators, government and community leaders, and the citizens of North Dakota. This afternoon, our stars continue to shine bright on the students of Valley City and communities all across North Dakota. At Valley City Public Schools, we have prepared, planned, and begun to implement a 4-step plan that allows us to overcome the obstacles created by COVID-19 and the closures of our schools. First of all, through the support from the Department of Public Instruction and the USDA, our district has served over 1,700 meals to students since Tuesday morning. I'd ad lib as well, Governor Burgum, that those individuals were standing out in 40, 50 mile an hour winds in the eastern part of North Dakota today with temperatures down in the single digits. My heart is warmed by this generous act of kindness and service from the food service department, cooks, and volunteers of our community. Next, our school counselors have led the efforts to ensure that 1,100 students have continued access to mental health services in Valley City. Our counselors have made house visits, had phone conversations, and online counseling sessions with students. They've set up 24/7 hotline to ensure that no student will go without mental health services during the closures of our schools. This determined and passionate group of educators has also partnered with our community family counselors, our school resource officer, and other professionals in Valley City to make sure that families are supported as well through this very stressful and uncertain time. Third, our committed and creative teachers have rolled up their sleeves and have created a plan on how to best educate students remotely. Whether it is a high school English teacher using our district's learning management system, or a kindergarten teacher creating a video that accompanies a learning packet. I know that teachers all across North Dakota, not just in Valley City, are getting it done right now. The schools will continue to work with families in supporting the education of their children. We are building genuine relationships through positive family engagement and creating a common focus to help the students grow and thrive. We have partnered with our local broadband provider, Beck Communications, to ensure that every student has access to a device and also high-speed internet. Governor Burgum, Superintendent Basler, you have done a remarkable job introducing us to innovation the past 4 years. Our educators need your support now more than ever to allow our professionals to use their skills to reach our students, teach them, and allow them to grow and reach their goals. Knowing how much North Dakotans value local control, we now need state support more than ever during these uncertain times. Your signing of an executive order allowing us to be able to use remote distance education, e-learning, is what is best for our students in the midst of these challenges of the coronavirus pandemic. Lastly, we're finalizing our efforts right now with a team back in Valley City to provide childcare services beginning on Monday for the essential employees in our community. This will include healthcare providers, emergency responders, and others that will need the service to support our community in the fight against COVID-19. The efforts that are being made in Valley City are only a small sample of what all public educators are doing across the great state of North Dakota. Thank you so much, Governor Burgum, Lieutenant Sanford, Superintendent Basler, for your service, your leadership. Please continue to look to our educators as a source of strength and stability in North Dakota. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. Great words, and we do look to our teachers and educators because we are, in many cases, they're the largest employer in their community and their pillar. Thank you for collaborating and working on childcare and a lot of other things to help the whole community. So that was Superintendent Johnson from Valley City. Next up, Superintendent Vollmer, who is also doing great engagement and great things in Minot. We've been hearing about it all week as you've been going through this planning stuff. Superintendent Vollmer also served on the statewide task force on innovative education that led to the bill that I just talked about earlier, so I want to thank him for his service on that in the earlier years. But again, thanks for being here with us today. Superintendent Vollmer.
Thank you. First, I'd like to begin by thanking Governor Burgum, Lieutenant Governor Sanford, Superintendent Basler, Director Tufte, and to everyone on the stage, and all of those people behind the stage and in the offices that are working tirelessly to provide direction to us. And I will just also say that on behalf of schools in the state of North Dakota, we think that our world is the biggest of all worlds, and we know that we are one slice of the pie that is being discussed here as we move forward with testing and moving to find some answers in this. And thank you to all of you for your time in including us and making sure that our answers were met. I'm going to share a little bit about what's happening in Minot Public Schools. I just want to say that the work that I'm sharing here today is not my work. It is work that has been done by great people doing good work, and it is designed more than anything to do right by the kids that we serve and the families that we serve. First of all, we have developed a multi-tier distant learning and school reintegration plan. We do not know what to expect. Matter of fact, when I came here today and learned what the governor's executive order was, and of which we are very grateful, it changed our outlook on what will be happening, and we are blessed to have the leadership at the state that we do. But we do know when it comes time to bring our kids back to school, we may not be able to bring everyone back in one fell swoop. We may have to look at reintegration. We want to assure everybody that we will continue to follow CDC and North Dakota Department of Health guidelines on this. This might involve, when that time comes, split schedules, limited access to large space and large meeting sizes. We've also developed distant learning plans They vary by level. Our initial elementary focus is on non-regression of learned skills and some advancement of core skills. Secondary is a little more advanced. They are more familiar with the digital platform. We have built a schedule for our secondary students that includes scheduled time for all students with all teachers, including intervention time and an online platform that will be done at least once a week. The district is working with our local internet providers as well to expand services for those in need. When the call went out, it was answered by SRT Communications. We are grateful for their leadership to help us get in the hands of students the ability to access the internet. We have now been working in the last couple of days, and we have students coming in with their parents to pick up all of the technology they may need, textbooks, all of those necessary things, including band instruments. I know our music teachers would want to make sure I mentioned that. So we continue to address that as well as social emotional issues. We have time for principals and counselors and school resource officers to continue to have touch points with students in needs, and we will provide support for those parents as well. I do want everyone to know that because these plans are changing, the plan that we submitted to the governor's office and to the Department of Public Instruction yesterday will change as we receive new word. This is not an unfamiliar ground for us. This is very similar in many ways to the 2011 Service River flood in Minot. Our mission at that time was to take crisis, turn it into opportunity. That remains our mission today. MPS is also providing meal service to our students and to any adults with disabilities in our community. Began on Tuesday. We are serving out of 6 schools with curbside service, and we are delivering with buses throughout our community and at Minot Air Force Base. 1,300 meals served yesterday, 2,500 meals served today, and most of those bags went home with notes from our paraprofessionals and our dedicated staff telling kids we miss them, we want you back as soon as you can, we care about you, and we're hoping that you're doing fine. We continue to meet with Minot Ward County officials in preparation to open those child care centers. I just received confirmation we will be opening 2, one in the north end, one in the south end. Those will be for families of essential workers in our community, and more information will be forthcoming. Our principals are going to continue regular work hours. Our counselors have office hours as well. That'll be all sent out to our families, and we know that we are going to do everything we can to meet the needs of our families, and we encourage our families to let us know on a day-to-day basis specifically what those needs are. In the midst of crisis, our mission always remains the same. We want to see our education continue. We want our families and our communities to remain healthy, and we want to be a support for our community. So we will continue to provide meals, offer those solutions for essential personnel, get technology devices in the hands of kids, and work with those local, state, and federal officials to meet the needs of everyone in our community and to keep everyone safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Vollmer from Minot. I think hearing from both you and Josh Johnson and the letter from Superintendent Pretzer in Scranton, I hope gives all North Dakotans the confidence that we've got educational leaders that are going to figure out a way to serve our students during these unprecedented times. And someone else who's been working day and night to make that happen is Superintendent Basler. She's got a few comments here today, but I want to thank her and her entire team for working so closely with us and with all of the stakeholder groups, the superintendents, the teachers union, and the governor's office as we work through this, as well as getting lots of information from other states as we go through this. But here's Superintendent Basler.
Thank you, Governor Burgum. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you once again for helping us communicate about these important issues. I can't tell you how proud I am to be up here. Superintendent Pretzer in Scranton with Superintendent Johnson and Vollmer. This is exemplars of who we are as educators in North Dakota. I think managing this situation has illustrated to so many North Dakotans the importance in the community infrastructure that our K-12 public school system provides. Not only just reading and math and science, but the roles that our schools play in so many areas of our children's lives and their families. I want to thank our teachers, our counselors, our support staff, and our educational educational leaders for their efforts and their superb work during this time. I also want to mention in the last years, we have also gained a much deeper understanding of the importance of families in the education of their loved ones. This past week has proved even more soundly the importance of the partnership between our families and our schools. Our North Dakota families are the first and most influential teachers of their children, and I'm even more confident today than I was last week that together we can and we will help our children through this unprecedented pandemic. To help schools meet the expectation of the governor's executive order, the Department of Public Instruction and North Dakota's EduTech have created a crowdsourced site in teams called the North Dakota K-12 Education Continuity Plan Team. It's a common space for educators for idea sharing, problem-solving collaboration, and plan sharing. We've asked our public and non-public administrators, our principals, our BIE leaders, and our special education directors to participate in this site. And as of just this afternoon, nearly 800 people have participated thus far. This is incredibly encouraging. It shows the willingness of our North Dakota educators to overcome the challenges presented by COVID-19. I want to also provide some additional updates to you. Last night, Congress passed and the President signed H.R. 6201. And this is the bill that will reimburse schools for their cost of providing free breakfast and lunch to schools and to students. This bill cuts the red tape in the school meal program, and it also gives the U.S. Agricultural Department authority to allow child care and adult care centers to also operate as meal distribution sites. Until now, the summer food service program has only been available to low-income areas. But the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction asked USDA for approval to allow all North Dakota schools to be meal distribution sites, and this new federal legislation makes that possible. We are continuing to seek and provide guidance about how to provide distance learning for our North Dakota special education students. We held a webinar this afternoon and are holding regular briefings with our local special education directors to answer these questions. Tomorrow, I have a call with the U.S. Office of Special Education Programs, and we hope to get additional details that can help serve those students. The North Dakota Department of Public Instruction and our North Dakota Information Technology Agency have identified, as you have heard by some of our superintendents, Superintendent Johnson and Superintendent Vollmer, that some students' homes lack the access to high-speed broadband. DPI has provided a locator tool in our guidance documents so local schools can work with their broadband providers in their areas to identify specific needs. And I want to leave you all with this. It's a sentiment that Superintendent Johnson and Vollmer and Superintendent Pretsky shared. It's times like these that we are reminded that we can and we should have the utmost confidence in our school teachers and leaders across this great state. When they are empowered and given the room that they need to be innovative, they are showing that they can accomplish great things. They are building emergency alternative plans and putting them into effect at the same time. So let's continue to give them the flexibility and our support as they design new ways to educate our students. We are all grateful for their skill and, most importantly, for their dedication to our young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Basler. Before we go to questions, there's a couple other announcements and one clarification that I want to make. The one clarification related to the executive order on the bar, restaurant, and other businesses closures that we talked about, that's becomes effective tomorrow at noon. And right now that order runs through April 6th, though effective tomorrow noon until April 6th. And that's in the, you can find the full executive order online for additional details. Capital access restriction and other state access, public access was effective immediately. So 2 different effective dates for those. In closing, I just want to give us some more gratitude. And I want to shout out to our congressional delegation, Senator Hoeven, Senator Kramer, Congressman Armstrong. These guys are working around the clock in D.C. We're seeing legislation coming through at a record pace in response to this unprecedented situation. And of course, what we're seeing and feeling is very strong and consistent communication coming out of the White House itself. Lieutenant Governor Sanford and I have been on multiple calls. There was one again today where Vice President Pence and Vice President Trump were on the call with 54 governors. How do you get up with more than 50? The governors of Guam and Marianas Islands and Virgin Islands Protectorates, United States, also are invited to call into these. So they're on the call, and they deliver the call, and then they take questions. And what I've seen is governors raising issues, and then those being responded to. One of the things that we brought up earlier in the week on Monday's call was that we were concerned in my role, not only as governor of North Dakota, but as chair of Western Governors, that the tribal nations were perhaps being left out of all the federal legislation that has been going through, and they said they'd hold a call. Yesterday there was a call with tribal leaders from around the country. Over 900 tribal leaders from the western states participated in that call with leadership from the BIA, Indian Health Services, Indian Education Services, and more than 9 more federal agencies who've got responsibilities related to tribal either economics, education, or health. And so a fantastic response going on there as well. Today, we had to reach out a one-on-one call from Secretary Scalia, who's Secretary of Labor, who wanted to talk to our state, specifically Commerce Commissioner Michelle Comer and myself were on that call, and he was talking about, again, funds that are available and asking for ways that that states might need additional flexibility relative to unemployment insurance or other related programs related to labor. Governor or Congressman, former Governor Hoeven, and now Senator Hoeven, last night reported that the work that they're doing through Senate Indian Affairs, that it was reported earlier that there's going to be $40 million of the federal legislation was going to Indian Health Services, and that's been raised with $64 million yesterday to $104 million. So lots of things continue to happen on the federal front, and a lot of the things that we're working on here in terms of work streams, whether it's ventilators, whether it's testing, whether it's surge capacity, those are the topics that are also coming up from other governors, and the federal government is responding. So again, I wanted to just share that. And again, we had questions in earlier press conferences, but as part of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, one element that's in that significant legislation is that coronavirus testing is going to be offered at no cost. And so that was a question that came up earlier. So the federal government has stepped in on that. With that, I will stand now for questions from anybody that's here. But before we do, I also want to thank Lieutenant Governor Sanford, who's been a key partner working shoulder to shoulder through all this, particularly as a former mayor. He understands everything the mayors are going through. He's talked to, I think, virtually every major mayor in the state and in this week. And then, of course, he's been very involved as a former small business owner. He and I together have a lot of empathy for the challenges that the private sector is going through right now in terms of how they care for and take care of their employees. So thanks to Lieutenant Governor Sanford for all of his great work as well. We'll open for questions.
Basler, can you clarify the plans that school districts are coming up with? Would you be at all allowing any school districts to actually reopen their school buildings to educate students? Or are we talking strictly remote learning at this point?
Yeah, I think.
I'll maybe take that one. Amy was asking a question about when we see the plans that are coming in, are we considering at some point we may be able to reopen school districts? Again, what we're trying to do in the order is separate school building access from the actual act of education. We tend to put those two things completely together. The plans that are due by next Friday, March 27th, then which will be reviewed. If approved, then alternative instruction begins on April 1st. The assumption for those plans is that there will still be restricted access to schools. Restricted meaning essential staff could get in, but maybe students may not. As we work our way through the remainder of the school year, as Superintendent Volmer and his team and might not have done planning, if we got to a spot, say later in April or in May, where he said, hey, we can start bringing people back in, but we're still under a nobody can gather by more than 10 people, well, maybe you could start doing one-on-one special education. Maybe you could have small groups. But as he said, maybe then you're not having, you're not doing the congregation the way we've done in the past. So even if we do reopen, the planning has to include, if you did reopen, how you might do it within the limits of social distancing that we still have. But for right now, we're looking for plans that would include the assumption that there still is restricted access to the buildings on April 1st. Dave?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask for clarification. During yesterday's briefing, you said that there would be an announcement about rest areas along our interstates. Would that, your executive order today, cover the rest areas as well?
I think that went out separately from NDDOT, and is that already out? If it's not already out, it's coming out soon, but this was identified as one other area where we could do our part to try to stop the spread. We do, again, would consider gas stations to be essential businesses. When we talk about food distribution, if we're going to keep the supply chains open to restaurants that are serving takeout, grocery stores that are trying to keep their shelves stocked, we do need to think about all of those people that work in the transportation industry, and specifically truck drivers who we know make good use of North Dakota rest stops. And that's why, again, we're strongly encouraging all gas stations to remain open to support that transportation logistics.
Not a follow-up, just a little different subject. There was a lot of talk in the national media, of course, today about unemployment. Unemployment rates might spike up. Are you concerned that North Dakota is going to have some pressure on its unemployment trust fund?
Question was a lot of talk nationally about increases in unemployment, and am I concerned about unemployment in the North Dakota Unemployment Trust Fund? The answer to that is, of course, yes, because one of the things that we're seeing with the unknowns is we don't know how long this is going to last. We do know that that there are, in some cases, where essential workers and some businesses may actually have an increased demand for employment, but there'll be other places where workers, if they're unable to work from home, or if we talked about hospitality today in one of the governor's calls. If you're the governor of Nevada and you've made an order to shut down the Las Vegas Strip, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of service workers that may be working in a great job today, and tomorrow they're in the unemployment line. So there is going to be stress. Governors did raise the question of federal backstops to those funds. I know that the federal government, one of the requests that we've made, and I emphasized again when they're thinking about providing funding to the states, is that if they would do the funding as a block grant to the state, then in the state of North Dakota, as Lieutenant Governor has suggested, then if we had a block grant, then we could decide where to put it and where to go. And a good place to put it might be into the unemployment fund, versus just doing the peanut butter where you spread it to everybody. You put it to the people that actually are not able to work from home and are actually truly unemployed. So we like that because we think it's a targeted strategy.
This would be a question really for any of the superintendents that are here that want to address this. And it sounds like more guidance is going to be coming on this, but can you talk about what sort of plans you are making for students with disabilities to learn remotely?
And if you could repeat the question too, Mark, because nobody can hear online without it.
The question was, what are we doing for students with disabilities? And that has been probably the most difficult of the discussions that we've had yet. We depend heavily on the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction for guidance in those areas. We have some good things in place. The advantage of this, and I think one of the specific advantages of today's executive order, is that it keeps everybody working. So we do have paraprofessionals working, and while one-on-one work might not be possible with our special education families, our case managers are working, and we're going to be developing and finalizing that plan for constant communication to do what we can do. The bottom line on all of it has to focus around the idea about safe and healthy communities. That is our ultimate goal, and we will be developing plans in conjunction with parents to move that work forward.
The question again, services that are being provided for special education or special populations of students, and I think this is an opportunity to really extend a shout out to our special education instructors in the Valley City area, but also across the state. I've talked to more than a dozen special education teachers in the last 2 days and can tell you that they have made personal contact with either the student and or parents of those students. Those individuals have rose to the top and gone out of their way. They've made house calls. They've gone over and sat down with students to provide instruction. They've also helped families to establish online connections so that they can utilize those tools as well. And so while we may not have all the answers relative to these educational plans and what things will look like, I do know that they as well have rolled up their sleeves, and it's going to take a different type of approach for our special populations, including those students with English learning and special education and other demographics. And so, again, I think it's an opportunity to give a shout out and kudos to those individuals.
And just from a state level, I will say, as Superintendent Vollmer said, the special education unit directors meeting with our special education director from a state level. Truly what we're focusing on is exactly what Superintendent Vollmer mentioned, the safe and well-being of not only our community and our citizens, but particularly in this situation to our special needs students and their families. What we're providing and what we are working with our federal delegation and the Federal Office of Special Education Programs is to allow our teachers and their leaders to focus on the instruction and the well-being, and to set aside some of the timelines and red tape that so often consumes our special education program. So that will be our focus from the Department of Public Instruction as we work with the individual directors, superintendents, and teachers.
Governor, when you talk to task forces or other governors or the vice president on creating these kinds of policies, is there a timeline being used to determine when the worst might come, or any kind of timeline when directing policy?
The question was, in talking with the vice president or the White House and other federal officials, is there a timeline that's being used in developing these? And the answer is no. But what is being looked at is, if you will call it, the growth curves. I mean, what we can do in North Dakota is take a look at the rate of growth of infection in other states like New York, California, and Washington, and we can see that we're trailing behind them. There's nothing to indicate that somehow things would be different in North Dakota, so we would expect that as we have 500 tests tomorrow, we're going to be back here tomorrow talking about that we've got more cases in North Dakota. So all the planning that we're doing, the unknown is a week or 2 weeks from now is where we're going to be. And one of the things that we can do in North Dakota that they were not able to do in Washington, part of the reason why you ended up with 27 deaths from one small 120-person nursing home was because they didn't know what they're up against. They didn't know it was coronavirus, and they didn't understand how it spread, and they weren't practicing social distancing. And so we have an opportunity, if you will, to try to flatten that curve here. But if and only if we're able to actually implement social distancing in a way where we can slow the spread. So if we can, slow the spread and slow the rate of infection, then we have an opportunity to not have our curve go straight up the way Italy and some other places have. But we would have to anticipate that we are not anywhere near a flattening of that curve yet. We're still in that point where we're going to be seeing cases grow. I would anticipate right now, based on today's news and based on the number of testing we're doing. Yes.
We've got a question from somebody who's joining online, Scott Hennon, AM 1100 The Flag out of Fargo. What guidance does the executive order include in regards to bars that serve food? Would they be able to take out, or if they don't have some type of delivery option?
Question is from Scott Hennon, and I've got a good answer, but I know the guy that's been working a lot on this and has talked to a lot of people, including bar owners, but I'm going to let Lieutenant Governor Brent Sanford maybe toss it in lower. But the question was, what does it mean relative to food or takeout? And the answer is we're encouraging people to do keep serving food, keep allowing takeout, keep doing curbside pickup. The executive order relates to on-site consumption of food and beverage. It does not relate to off-sale or off-site delivery of food. Brent, you want to? I got it. Okay. All right.
I've got two completely unrelated questions that hopefully will be pretty quick. So the legislature's budget section voted today to accept $6 million in CDC funds, and our understanding is that North Dakota is going to be receiving $4.6 million of that money now. Do we know when the rest of those funds, I think it's $1.4 million, will be coming to the state?
I'm looking to Mylin, but I think the answer, because this was what was approved by the Emergency Commission earlier, and as it goes, if it's above a certain limit, it gets approved by the Emergency Commission. Then the legislature also ratifies, if you will, that amount of spending. The difference between the 6 and the 4.5 was that it's a range, and that range depends on our situation. So they're guaranteeing a state a minimum amount. The minimum amount that we would expect to get is the 4.5, but they've reserved the flexibility in that funding to where you've got certain states where they may be having a more extreme outbreak than we do. Then they would peel off that last 10 or 15% of those funds and move them to other states. So that's why there's a difference between them. So it's a minimum of 4.5 up to 6 is what we voted on in Emergency Commission.
Okay. And then my other question, any of the new cases that are announced today, particularly the ones here in Burleigh County, are any of them related to the band trip that Bismarck Public School students took within the last week or so?
I don't have that information, and I'm looking to Mylin, but even if we did, I'm not sure we'd be releasing it. The question was, are any of the cases in Burleigh County related to the band trip that was taken by over 100 folks, parents and chaperones and band personnel from Bismarck? Any of the new cases related to that?
So Mylin Tufte, we can tell you that 6 of the new cases were travel related and 2 were community spread. And these investigations are ongoing.
And when, as we all learn new terms, when Mylin, who's our state health officer who just spoke, talked about investigations ongoing, we do have teams that do contact tracing. So when we find someone who is tested positive, the trained team calls them up as part of our epidemiology group, and then would call them up and say, hey, where have you been? Who have you been in contact with? And we try to establish whether it was a travel related or whether it was unknown.
Question: does the executive order of closing businesses apply also to like hair salons and nail salons, places like that?
The question was, does the executive order related to businesses, and again, I'm trying to get away from the word closing businesses. We're trying to be a little more precise than that because we're not asking people to close. We're asking people to stop on-site delivery of their services. The question was, does it apply also to hair salons and nail salons? At this time, it does not. But again, we have many business owners that have taken it upon themselves to make those decisions or create alternative approaches. But in some of the personal service categories, it's really impossible to conduct business and still maintain social distancing. We also know that many of those are individual proprietors, and they've got it would cause even more stress on them. So again, trying to balance the number of contacts they might have. You could have, more people in one bar on St. Patrick's Day than a hairdresser might see in a month. So again, we're trying to also look at the proportionality of it, and we're trying to take away the largest number of contacts possible with the least amount of impact on entrepreneurs and sole proprietors. But other states have gone to that and included those types of businesses in their executive orders. We did not do that today. Another question?
Has anything changed with daycare services?
Question was, has anything changed with daycare, childcare? I would say nothing has changed. The restriction K-12 students to K-12 student buildings, as we said, remains in effect. We did not include any childcare closures in our earlier order. And again, this is an approach that we arrived at on our own. It turns out many other states have also taken the same approach, including Minnesota, which is, again, we had 45,000 kids in childcare, and if you shut childcare, a couple things happen. One is people can't go to work, including essential people that are going to work, and the other thing is then alternative arrangements are made for those kids, and some of those alternative arrangements may put them in places where we wouldn't want them to be, including potentially exposing grandparents or great-grandparents. So we were trying to balance all these things, and again, the private sector is K-12 public sector, for the most part in North Dakota. 93% of the students are go to a public or government-run school, so we've got sort of direct authority there. Childcare is nearly 100% private sector, and many of those, there's over 1,800 childcare providers in the state of North Dakota. The vast majority of them have decided to stay open, and of course they're trying to up their social distancing where you can. They're trying to up their hygiene where they can, trying to teach kids how to wash their hands better, say gamify it. But I mean, there's a lot of things that are being done there by some smart, proactive childcare providers. When the superintendents were talking about childcare, Superintendent Vollmer, we're really talking about the kids that are in K through 6 that may be not old enough to stay home alone or be a babysitter themselves, but if they're essential service worker, Minot's working on a plan to use their CLC or their community learning center staff, the people that provide the activities before school and after school for kids today, to be able to provide that during the day to effectively provide a child care opportunity. But again, the CLC program, which receives federal funding, this is not open gym. It's not throw a bunch of kids in a gym. There's learning components that are part of that as well, and so they would be following those guidelines. But we think of child care as an essential service in North Dakota, and we spend boatloads of money in the state on long-term care. We spend boatloads of money on traditional health care. We spend billions of dollars, $2.8 billion in a biennium to be exact, on K-12, and the child care providers are out there getting about $23 million from state or other aid. So they're getting, others are getting billions. These guys are getting tens of millions, and they are as important or maybe more important. Maybe we'll come through this in understanding just how important, qualified, safe, caring, educational child care is in our state, because it's, like I said, it's an essential element. If we don't have it today with working parents in our economy, basically the economy stops without it.
Question from Eric Arndt with KZZY Radio out of Devil's Lake. Given the economic impact that this may have, do we foresee, or is any discussion about looking at the legacy fund as any way to help mitigate that, or would anything qualify for that?
A question that came in from Devil's Lake Media was, are we looking at the legacy fund? Answer today is, from the standpoint of myself, no, we're not looking at the legacy fund. Again, legacy fund, it's important that we do everything we can to try to protect the principal. And if we've said too, again, the earnings that come off of that are someday, we said a month ago, someday those earnings are going to be needed to replace the revenue the state gets from the tremendous amount of reliance we have on oil prices. Today, oil was as low as 25. It bounced up to $26 a barrel. That day that we were talking about 20 years in the future, maybe next year, that we've got to use legacy fund earnings to replace what we're doing just to provide basic government services. But it'll only replace a portion of it, because even with the full earnings, again, our general fund budget last year was $4.8 million, and legacy fund threw off about, $350, $400 million of earnings. So it wouldn't even cover 10% of it today. So again, we've got to protect the principal, got to let that grow. Now you say, well, where's the money going to come from? One thing that the federal government can do that states can't do, and that's print money. And we're looking at unprecedented amounts of federal stimulus programs that appear to have bipartisan support. As I said earlier, if that can come in the form of a block grant, which is they give a chunk of money to a state, then we could start making decisions at the state level of what's the best way to support those that were most economically hit by this, what will be a historic black swan event in terms of economic change from rapid growth and strong economy to a downturn. It's I mean they'll be teaching this in economics classes for the next 100 years. But the story remains to be told how we're going to come through it.
If there's a business that decides to keep doing on-site business, is there any penalties for that?
Question was. If there's a business that continues to do on-site services, and I'm assuming you're asking in a food and beverage, are there going to be penalties for that? We're pausing on that one because I guess we don't know. It is an executive order, so executive orders carry the weight of law, and so there is the potential for penalties. I guess the question is collaborating with the local city governments in particular, in the form of liquor license. That's something that is generally managed locally, and so I would guess that we'd be collaborating with local cities about that. But I'm certain that if we have 99% compliance and somebody decides to stay open, we're going to hear about it from all their competitors, and the city will be paying them a visit. That's, I guess, how I would see how this would happen. But again, we're asking for North Dakotans to understand the importance of this in terms of not only protecting their patrons and their customers, but the lives of those most vulnerable in our state. So we would look for full cooperation in following the executive order. Okay, I think unless there's anybody up here that wants to say anything else, we're at that point for closing comments. Again, I want to close with the reiteration of the strategy. We're in a global pandemic. There are Western countries like Italy with strong medical resources, but have an aging population that's not dissimilar to North Dakota, where we've got a large population over age 65, over age 70, over age 80 in North Dakota. And so then we need to make sure that to preserve the capacity we have to best serve those people who may be infected by the coronavirus. To do that, we have to try to slow the transmission of this deadly virus. And to do that, we are practicing social distancing. That's requiring things that this country has never had to go through before, our state's never had to go through before, and that's why you're seeing the executive orders coming through today to both try to deregulate so we can have more surge capacity on the medical side, where we can continue to provide education to our students and nutrition, even though the buildings might be closed. Again, separating the educational mission from the actual opening of the buildings, and then asking our private sector, who's already been great in many cases, to take another step, which I know is going to be economically painful, but it has the potential to save lives, is asking them for their support of the executive order, which we just issued about business closures. So with that, I want to say thank you. But I guess I'm getting people waving little fingers. Waving fingers at me mean that there's one more question?
No, I just wanted to clarify. Violating a provision of the executive order is an infraction.
Okay, violating the provision of executive order is an infraction. Okay, that's, I'm sure, a legal term. But $1,500 fine, or up to $1,500 fine. Okay, thank you for that input from the audience. That is being able to real-time search. We're not able to do that here at the podium, but thank you for some of you doing that. With that, again, as we close, as we say to all North Dakotans, I guess this is a period of incredible disruption, but through disruption, we get to choose how we respond to that, and we can respond to that that newness with creativity and innovation. You heard that from some of our superintendents that were here today. We have a great opportunity as a state to come out of this stronger than ever before. But as we face this genuine, real health crisis, again, our thoughts and prayers go out to anybody that's already tested positive, the one individual that's hospitalized. We're certainly thinking about them and their family, and we want to make sure that we do everything we can to save lives in our state. And so again, thanks everybody for their collaboration. The collaboration, I would say, among the healthcare providers has been outstanding. And we've had people this week, people that normally would be competing against each other across the street from each other, whether it's in clinics or hospitals, have all been sitting around the table trying to figure out how's the way we can work together to serve the most number of North Dakotans. And I would say that shout out to all the people in the medical profession, the clinics, the hospitals, doing fantastic work across our state. And they're also thinking, how do they help each other across the street? And they're also, the large ones are saying, how is we can assist them, help those that are in smaller communities, rural communities, critical access care. I mean, we're seeing genuine, open, sit down at the table between the senior leaders of competitors. How can we help North Dakotans? That should give North Dakotans a great feeling, just like you saw great educational leaders at the podium today. We've got some great healthcare leaders that are providing leadership everywhere, and they really are thinking beyond their own organization and beyond their current clients or patients. They're thinking about the public health of everybody in North Dakota, just like these leaders are thinking about the education of all of our future leaders. So thank you for that, and thanks for being here today, and we'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.